Hey all you pretty people out there, I am Sam and you're watching Test Driven TV. Today we are test driving the all-new, completely redesigned 2023 Toyota Prius. And this is a fully loaded limited, so it's got all the bells and whistles for us to talk about. So I'm going to show it to you inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard that the redesigned Toyota Prius for 2023 is actually sexy. I think it's 70% sexier than before. Now, the last generation Prius wasn't bad looking. They did a lot of work to it to sort of bring it up and make it look a little bit less like a science experiment. But this, look at this. This is a car that I would be proud to drive up in front of my friends in. Not only because I want them to think I'm smart, but because I want them to think I've got good taste for a change. And so that's not to badmouth the old Prius, but look at this. Just look at how good this car looks. And the face not only has all of the Toyota styling DNA that we've gotten used to, but it still carries a lot of the Prius DNA. Signature lighting all the way across, LED. It's got LED headlights. And coming around the corner, this particular trim grade limited has 19-inch alloy wheels and some pretty low profile tires, a little bit wider, a little bit grippier for handling. If you go down into the LE trim grade, those tires are really dialed better for fuel economy. And that's why if you look at the different trim grades, the limited like we have here is the lowest of the fuel economy. If you get the LE with the different tires, wheels, it has better fuel economy. Now, the shape of this car not only looks good, but it has aerodynamics like never before. Look at the slope from the hood coming up to the windshield. Those are almost the same angle. This has got a lower set windshield that rakes back even more than I've ever noticed before with the Prius, and it's something you really notice sitting behind the wheel. It's not unlike a Lamborghini or something like that. In terms of size, the all-new Prius is a little bit larger than before. The wheelbase, 2 inches longer, the length, 1 inch longer, it's 1 inch wider, and it's 2 inches lower to the ground. When you look at it from this view, you can see especially that 2-inch drop really shows up. It makes it look sleeker, it makes it look even longer than it is. The window line here at the rear is a little bit sleeker than before. It's a new look, and this actually has a vertical pull handle built into the door. It's got an electronic switch in there, so it just pops open when you put your fingers back behind it. Fixed roof panel on the top on the limited, a black painted panel between it and the rear hatch. And when we come down to the rear hatch, something I want to point out here that's a little different than Prius's of before is the vertical part of the hatch no longer has a window in it. And so that makes it less complex, but it also lessens the view from behind the wheel. When you look into the rear view mirror, that no longer has that extra bit of visibility going through the hatch. That's a little bit of a downside there, but this does also have the electronic mirror with the backup camera built in, so you can project a full view on that mirror if that works for you. But looking at the rear three-quarter view, it actually looks muscular. It actually looks rather svelte, I'd say. What has always been said about the Prius interior is that it's forward-looking and futuristic, and this latest generation is nothing short of that. This is a place that really makes you think and makes you imagine and get inspired as to what can be when it comes to interior design. A few things that are different than before. The Prius always had sort of an instrument cluster and control over here in the center of the dash. Now they've moved it over, a genuine instrument cluster directly ahead of the driver, and then a separate screen in the center for the infotainment. There is ambient lighting across the dash, and it's well laid out in terms of appeal and design. But one thing I can tell you is sitting in the seat and trying to adjust the steering wheel to a place that I can see over it into that instrument cluster, I end up with a steering wheel that's a little bit lower than I might like. Now, what is that instrument cluster? That is a 7-inch digital display that you can customize just a little bit and do a few things with. The steering wheel is wrapped with Softex, which is simulated leather. It is a nice design. It's got high quality switchgear on it. And as mentioned, in the center is a 12.3-inch display screen for infotainment. Below that, a full bank of HVAC controls, hard controls, which I like. The center console is sort of a nice design. It's got a little cubby up front that I like to lay my phone here. There isn't a wireless charger here though. That's actually back here in this little bit of a slot. It's kind of an interesting slot, and mine doesn't quite fit in it with my case, but if you have a phone without a case, you can put that in there and use that as the wireless charger. Cup holders behind this cubby, a nice electronic toggle for the gear selector and a few drive modes, and then here is where the center console storage is. Now that's just about large enough to put a rectangular tissue box in, but not much larger. These seats, I found them to be, for the most part, comfortable this week. They have heating and ventilation here in the limited trim grade, and this is power adjustable on the driver's side, manually adjustable on the passenger side. The back seat of the Prius has always been a place that you would call a compact car, but as I sit here right now and you can look at what I've got in the way of space, these seats are set for my height, about 5'8" with my tennis shoes on. I've got about 3 to 4 inches ahead of my knees, so if I had a 6-footer sitting in this seat ahead of me, I'd probably still be okay. The big thing I was going to be curious about when I got this car this week is with the lower roof line, what's the headroom going to be like, and especially back here in the back where this seat tends to be higher to make room for the hybrid battery that's underneath. But the good news is I've got about 2 inches above my head, even with this dual sunroof that's back here. Now, I do still feel like I'm sitting sort of down in a hole in a small car, in a sedan, in spite of the fact that we typically have a higher seat back here. So the good part about that is that I've got good side-to-side support. And so even though I am sort of sitting down in a hole, I'm well supported in it. Now, as I look around at the amenities back here, missing our vents on the back of this console, but again, we're in a price range where that can go either way. There are heated seats back here, that is optioned, and luckily also down there below are 2 USB ports for charging. There is a center armrest here that you can fold down when you don't have that third person sitting in the middle. Looking at the cargo space, pretty decent cargo space in the back of a Prius. Now, yes, we have this fast roof, so it's not super tall and square, but it is a decently sized cargo area. When these seats are folded down, that expands prodigiously. A lot of space to haul gear, camping, or just go shopping. When it comes to rating this interior, I have to say that I'm very impressed with the overall design. It's very nice to look at, and I like a lot of the feature content that's here, especially in this limited trim grade, the heated ventilated seats, this soft text seating. Even though it's not leather, it still works quite well, and I don't find that I sweat on it too badly here on the hotter days. I love the double sunroof, and the comfort in here is very good. Yes, some of the materials could be a little bit better of quality as you sort of get around here. There's lots of hard plastic to scratch on, but we are in a price range that is commensurate with that. And lastly, while it is just a little tiny complaint, some of the design issues could be improved, but overall, all small things. This interior gets 5 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is a full boat JBL Sound 12.3-inch display, and it has a lot of the new Google Inside type of cloud-based services. Now, here you don't say, "Hey Google," you say, "Hey Toyota." As I've looked around here, they don't actually have this signed up for a subscription, and so things like navigation, that costs extra. I will say that navigating around on the menus is a little bit of a task. It takes some getting used to learn how this actually works. It's very much like using Windows or Android phones, because that's really sort of where the back end is here. The audio quality from the JBL is pretty decent, but not nearly as good as I would expect for the top tilt stereo. Adjusting the sound and trying to get it where I'd like it just didn't quite get me to a place that I was happy with the sound. So as I rate this system, I've liked it in some of the other Toyotas, but here, missing the subscription service, I suddenly realized how many features I don't have for the $37,000 spent for this car. This infotainment system gets 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my good friends, now it's time to take a drive in the all-new Prius. And because my perspective is that this is a city car, most people are going to be driving this in the city, to the city, in the suburbs, not really an out on the back roads, windy road car. We're test driving it in the city today. I think that's appropriate. That's how I would drive it if I owned this car. So let's talk about the chassis first. What's under this car is the latest variation of the TNGA platform architecture. That's Toyota New Global Architecture. I like how they came up with that. And the last generation, also built on TNGA, was a big, huge improvement over the one that came before it. And this is an evolution of that. What you get here is a car that has a McPherson strut front suspension. It has a multi-link rear suspension, and it has a driving feel and character that's just as good as the old Prius, if not slightly better. Now that this does have a 2-inch longer wheelbase, it's a bit more of a stable ride, and Toyota has tuned just a little bit of a float into it, so it's a ride that you could almost call cushy. Yeah, and so we're not on the freeway right now, but we did our freeway 70-mile-an-hour decibel test. That came in at 57.6, which is about average, maybe slightly less. So it's pretty quiet, and it would probably even be quieter with the LE and the smaller tires. But I do find that the steering has a nice light feel. It's very communicative around town, and getting on and off the freeway and at speed, it feels very tight. And driving around town over road irregularities, and we have a lot of those here in Phoenix, potholes, manhole covers, speed bumps. This is a suspension that feels pretty supple. I will say that when you really hit big bumps, they do come crashing into here with a little bit of a loud bump and thump, but partially that's because we do have these low profile tires. Now, one of the tests I love to do on any car, especially here in the city, is the speed hump test. Now, the speed humps are these sort of big giant speed bumps that we have a lot of around here in Phoenix. They keep us from going too fast on neighborhood streets. And I have found that they're a great test to see how well bolted together this chassis is and the suspension. And so I usually take these at the speed limit, which here is 25 miles an hour. And sometimes you get a big crash, other times you don't. And so I find that's a good measure of how solid the chassis is. And so rolling at 25, a little bit of a rebound bump, but not bad. Whew. It just has a nice light feel. So I am impressed with this chassis. Well done, Toyota. It's everything the last generation was, which I rated quite well, and even better. This chassis gets 5 out of 5 stars. I think the big news for 2023 is what's under the hood. More horsepower than ever before. And what makes that happen is a new 2-liter Atkinson cycle gasoline engine mated to a more powerful hybrid synergy drive transmission. The engine has 150 horsepower. The electric motor that drives the wheels has 111, and together they make a total of 194 horsepower. That is way more than before. So if you watch my video, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? It's droning, and 60. Power is noticeably better, no question about it. Yes, we still have the leaf blower effect that, well, Priuses have always been known for, but it's a powertrain that does deliver more power, especially when you want it. You mash the pedal, this thing goes. Just driving around town, the electric mode seems to be a little bit stronger, and when the gasoline engine steps in, yes, you can hear it. Yes, it still has that leaf blower effect, but it's just much more enjoyable than before. So at the end of the day, when it comes to rating this powertrain, it still gets a hit or two for a little bit of a noisiness. It's always been the case with the Prius. It does sound like a leaf blower when you really get on it. And my own fuel efficiency that I got this week wasn't quite up to snuff. 45 mpg against a rated 52. And in fairness, I had the air conditioner on the entire time, but again, I only saw it in the lower 40s for mpg. This powertrain gets 4 out of 5 stars. Now that we've test driven it and I've showed it to you inside out, now it's time to have a conversation about value. Is it worth the money? Now, as tested, we're at $37,000 and some change, fully loaded, limited Prius. The only thing you can do more here is get the all-wheel drive, and that's a bit more money on top of this, but we're sort of at the top end here, obviously, unless you step up and you get the plug-in hybrid, which has a different pricing structure. Not a lot more, but it is more. Now, that said, $37,000, How is that a value? Well, when I look at warranty coverage, it's class average compared to Hyundai and Kia. They really outshine almost every other brand out there. And when I look at quality, I did find some fit and finish issues on the interior, a little bit of rattling here and there. And when you slam these doors, they sound like a Toyota door when they slam, kind of like a microwave oven. They just haven't quite gotten that sound deadening thing down with their door slams yet. Decades later. But that said, I think this is a car that is just so much better than the one that came before it. It is sexier, 70% sexier, as I said, and it drives much better. It's much more enjoyable to drive every day. So I put value at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4.5 stars for the review. Exceptional score. Now, here's the thing. We've got more information on the Prius. I've got another video right here, a full underhood tour. You can see that. If you want to get into the technicals of what makes this thing go, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.